I received an anonymous tip about Mark Thompson's suspicious activity on a rainy Tuesday. To be honest, at first I didn't take it very seriously. How could someone so influential and respected be involved in something so sordid? I thought as I read the email that arrived unannounced in my inbox. "Lucas, if you want the truth, follow the money," the message said. Mark Thompson is not what he seems. Manipulated news, bribes, he's up to his neck in it. For a moment, I was paralyzed. Mark was my boss, an influential editor, someone I always looked up to. But at the same time, something inside me said I needed to investigate. Maybe it was journalistic curiosity, maybe it was the desire to clear my name of any association with such practices, or maybe it was simply the desire to know the truth. At the end of the day, I decided to start the investigation on my own. I went to the neighborhood coffee shop, where I knew I could work without being disturbed. I opened my laptop and began searching for patterns in the news published under Mark's supervision. What I found was disturbing. There were a number of important stories that seemed to have been tweaked to favor certain politicians and business people. This can't be a coincidence, I muttered to myself. The next day, I went deeper. I used contacts I had in the newsroom to find out more about the sources of this news. That's when I noticed that some reporters mysteriously disappeared after writing stories that went against the interests of certain powerful figures. So it's true, I thought, with a chill running down my spine. During lunch, I sat with Sarah, a brilliant hacker who worked in the company's IT department. I didn't know if I could trust her yet, but I needed help. "Sarah, can I talk to you for a moment?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Of course, Lucas." "What's going on?" she replied, with a curious look. "Have you heard any rumors about Mark? Something dark?" I asked hesitantly. She looked around, making sure no one was listening, and whispered, "Yes, I have. And to be honest, I've suspected him for a while." That took me by surprise. "Really? Why?" "Because some confidential company files got past me, and there were things that didn't make sense. Handling information that seemed to have been tweaked. I got an anonymous tip about Mark. They say he's involved in bribery and news manipulation. I started looking into it and I think it's true." She nodded, seeming to already know that. "If you're willing, I can help. I have my own personal reasons for wanting to take him down." "What kind of reasons?" I asked, curious. "It doesn't matter now," she replied firmly. "The bottom line is, if we want to expose Mark, we need to be cautious. He's dangerous." And thus, our alliance was formed. We returned to the newsroom, but with a new mission. I would continue to investigate the news, while Sarah would use her hacking skills to find more concrete evidence. We knew we were entering dangerous territory, but the truth needed to be revealed. In the following weeks, our investigations led us to uncover a scheme even more vast than we imagined. Mark had ties to powerful and corrupt figures, and was manipulating news to favor his allies in exchange for bribes. Each new discovery was like a piece of a dark puzzle, revealing a picture of corruption that went far beyond what was imaginable. "Careful, Lucas," Sarah warned me one night as we analyzed data in her apartment. "We are messing with powerful people. We need to be extremely careful." "I know, Sarah. But I can't stop now. The truth needs to come out." And with those words, we knew we were committed. The mission was dangerous, yes, but journalistic integrity and justice demanded that we move forward. And together, we were determined to do just that. When I finally managed to gather some initial evidence about Mark Thompson's suspicious activities, I felt like I needed someone who could help me dig deeper, someone with technical skills that I didn't possess. It was then that I thought about Sarah, the brilliant hacker who worked in the company's IT department. Although we weren't exactly close friends, I always admired his competence and his ability to solve complex problems with impressive ease. I decided to approach her during one of our breaks. It would be a risk, but I needed to take the risk. "Sarah, do you have a minute?" I asked, trying to sound as casual as possible as I approached her table. She looked up from the monitor, where lines of code flashed incessantly. "Of course, Lucas. What do you need?" she replied, with a mix of curiosity and caution. I looked around to make sure there was no one around who could hear us. So I sat in the chair next to her and lowered my voice. "I found out some things about Mark, serious things. Have you ever suspected anything about him?" I asked, trying to probe her. To my surprise, Sarah's eyes narrowed and she sighed, as if she had been waiting for this question for some time. "Actually, yes. I always thought there was something wrong with him." She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "I have my own reasons for wanting to overthrow him, but I've never had concrete proof." "What did you discover?" I explained to her everything I had found so far, the manipulated news, the connections with corrupt political figures, and the bribes. His eyes widened as I detailed my findings. "This is serious, Lucas. If what you're saying is true, we're dealing with something very big." She leaned back in her chair, thoughtful. "We need more proof, something irrefutable." "Exactly. And that's where you come in. I need your help to access files that are beyond my reach." I knew I was asking a lot, but I didn't see any other way out. Sarah was silent for a few moments, and I could see the internal battle she was fighting. Finally, she looked at me with determination. "I'm in. We have to be discreet and careful." She paused and her expression turned dark. "Mark is not just a corrupt editor, he is dangerous. But I'm willing to take the risk." I smiled, relieved and grateful. "Thank you, Sarah. I won't forget this." She nodded and began to make a plan. "First thing, we need a safe place to work. We can't do that here at the company, it's too risky. I have a place where we can meet after work." She wrote down an address on a piece of paper and handed it to me. "Meet me there at 8. I will be there." I took the paper and put it in my pocket. "And again, thank you." As I walked back to my desk, I felt a mixture of fear and excitement. I knew we were entering dangerous territory, but I also knew I was no longer alone in this fight. With Sarah by my side, my chances of success increased significantly. At 8 o'clock sharp, I arrived at the address Sarah had given me. It was a small apartment in an old building. I rang the doorbell and she opened the door quickly, pulling me inside. "Let's start," she said, with a determined expression. "We have a long way to go." And so, together, we begin our journey to expose the truth and take down Mark Thompson. Each step we took brought us closer to the goal, but it also increased the risk. We knew that if we were discovered, the consequences would be severe. However, the quest for justice and journalistic integrity was stronger than any fear we might have felt. As we progressed in our investigation, I began to notice something that left me deeply unsettled. Clara, my girlfriend and lawyer for one of the companies involved in the corruption scheme, could be inadvertently linked to this whole tangle of dirt. The pressure on our relationship was immense, but I knew I couldn't tell her anything at that moment. I needed to protect her. One night, after an exhausting day of work, Clara and I were having dinner in silence. She looked worried, and I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd discovered. The silence was heavy, almost palpable. Finally, she broke the ice. "Lucas, you've been different lately. What is happening?" asked Clara, with a look of concern in her eyes. I desperately wanted to open my heart and tell her everything, but I knew that could put her in even greater danger. "It's just work, Clara. Things are very intense in the newsroom," I replied, trying to sound casual. She stared at me, clearly unconvinced, but decided not to press further. Over the next few days, I continued my investigation with Sarah, but doubt and guilt consumed me inside. I needed advice, someone I could trust. I decided to talk to Sarah about the matter. "Sarah, I need to talk to you," I said, as soon as I entered the room where she worked. She was surrounded by screens, typing furiously on one of the keyboards. "Of course, Lucas." "What there was?" she asked, without looking away from the screen. I'm starting to think Clara might be connected to this whole scheme. I don't know what to do, I confessed, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders as I finally shared my concern. Sarah stopped what she was doing and looked at me seriously. Lucas, this is complicated. Are you sure? She asked, with a tone of voice that mixed concern and seriousness. No, I'm not sure. But some documents I found mention the company where she works. I can't tell her anything yet. I need to protect her, I explained, trying to justify my decision. Sarah nodded slowly. I understand. But you need to be careful. She could end up getting hurt if she doesn't know what's going on. Let's continue investigating and, when we are more sure, we can decide the best path forward, she suggested, returning to focus on the screens. I thanked him for the advice and left the room. Sarah's words gave me a little relief, but the worry was still there, latent. I continued investigating, trying to piece together the puzzle without involving Clara directly. One night, while Clara was sleeping, I was on my laptop analyzing some documents. Suddenly, she woke up and took me by surprise. Lucas, what are you doing? He asked, his voice groggy with sleep. Just a little work, love. Go back to sleep, I replied, trying to sound unconcerned. She walked over and looked at the screen, but I quickly closed the laptop. You're hiding something from me, he stated, with a tone of voice that mixed sadness and distrust. Clara, trust me. I'm just trying to protect you, I replied, holding his hands. She looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to decipher my thoughts, but finally nodded and went back to bed. I knew I was walking a fine line, but I needed to keep going. The next few days were an emotional roller coaster. Each new discovery brought more tension to our relationship. Clara continued to sense that something was wrong, but I insisted on remaining silent. My priority was to protect her, even if it meant carrying the weight of guilt and doubt alone. Finally, one night, while Sarah and I were analyzing a crucial document that could definitively link Clara's company to the corruption scheme, my phone rang. It was Clara. Lucas, we need to talk. Now, she said, with an urgency that made me freeze. I knew this was the decisive moment. He needed to decide whether to continue protecting her with silence or finally reveal everything and face the consequences together. I took a deep breath and looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. It was time to face the truth, no matter the cost. The clock struck exactly midnight when Sarah and I finally managed to access the company's secret servers. We were sitting in a dark room, lit only by the glow of computer screens. The silence was almost palpable, interrupted only by the sound of our nimble fingers typing frantically. Lucas, I think I found something big here, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. I walked over to look at her screen and was stunned by what I saw. There were, before us, documents detailing million-dollar bribes and email exchanges that proved the manipulation of important news. It was the irrefutable proof we needed to take down Mark Thompson. This is unbelievable, Sarah. We have to transfer these files immediately, I replied, feeling adrenaline rush through my veins. We started copying the files to a USB stick, aware of the danger we were in. We were so focused that we almost didn't notice the security alert that started flashing in the corner of the screen. Shit! We've been detected! Sarah exclaimed. The heart raced. We have to get out of here now, Lucas. I took the pen drive and quickly turned off the computer. Sarah was already on her feet, ready to flee. We ran out of the room, trying to stay calm, but the tension was palpable. The hallway was deserted, but we knew we didn't have long before someone came to investigate. We need to hide this evidence somewhere safe, I whispered to Sarah as we ran up the emergency stairs. If they catch us with this, we'll be screwed. She nodded and, with a quick movement, removed a small compartment from the sole of her sneaker. We put the flash drive in there, and I couldn't help but admire her ingenuity. Let's go to the car. I have a safe hiding place in my house, she said, as we continued down the stairs. We hurried across the parking lot and got into Sarah's car. The engine roared and we quickly got out of there. We drove in silence for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. "Do you think we could transfer everything before the alert?" I asked, breaking the silence. "I think so. At least most of it. But we need to be quick." "They'll start looking for us," she replied, her eyes fixed on the road. We arrived at Sarah's house and quickly went inside. She took me to a back room, where there was a safe hidden behind a painting. "Put the flash drive here," she said, as she opened the safe. I did as she asked, and when the safe closed, I felt momentary relief. But we knew that was just the beginning. We needed to analyze all that information and find a way to expose Mark without compromising ourselves. "Sarah, this is just the beginning. We need a more elaborate plan. Something that will protect us while we release this evidence," he said, trying to think of all the variables. "I know, Lucas. But one thing at a time. Let's get some rest and tomorrow we'll start planning," she replied, trying to calm me down. I nodded, knowing she was right. We needed to be at our best to face what came next. We went to the living room and sat on the couch, still in silence. The weight of responsibility we carried was enormous, but we also knew we had the chance to make a difference. "Lucas, thank you for trusting me," Sarah said, looking me in the eye. "I know it won't be easy, but we're in this together." "I appreciate it, Sarah. Without you, I wouldn't have come this far." "Let's do this together and make sure justice is served," I replied, feeling a new wave of determination. That night showed us how dangerous the path we had chosen was, but it also made us stronger. We were ready to face any obstacle that came our way, as we knew that the truth needed to be exposed, at any cost. Ever since I started to distrust David, my mentor, a feeling of discomfort hadn't left me. David had always been an example of integrity to me, someone I blindly trusted and admired. However, his recent strange and suspicious behavior has begun to make me uneasy. I knew that in order to fully understand what was happening and ensure our investigation was successful, I needed to uncover the truth about him. It all started when I noticed that David was avoiding certain topics and behaving evasively when Mark Thompson's name came up in conversations. He, who had always been so direct and transparent, now seemed to be hiding something. One night I decided it was time to follow David to find out what he was hiding. At 8 o'clock I saw David leave the office and decided to follow him from a safe distance. "Are you sure you want to do this, Lucas?" Sarah asked me, her tone thick with concern. We were sitting in his car, a short distance from the building where David lived. "Yes, Sarah. I need to know the truth about him. If he's involved with Mark, we need to know now, before it's too late." She nodded, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "Just be careful." As we followed David, he headed to a discreet bar in the city center. I parked the car a few blocks away and walked to the place. Upon entering, I saw David sitting at a table in the corner, talking to a man I didn't immediately recognize. I decided to approach discreetly, trying to hear the conversation. "I did what you asked, but I can't go through with this," I heard David say, his voice thick with tension. "Lucas is getting closer to the truth, and I can no longer protect him without compromising myself." The other man, who I quickly identified as one of Mark's henchmen, responded coldly, "You know you have no choice, David. If you don't continue, we will expose everything we know about you." My heart raced. David was being blackmailed. That explained his strange behavior. I decided it was time to confront him. I stepped out of the shadows and approached the table. "David, what's going on here?" I asked, trying to stay calm even though my insides were in turmoil. David turned pale when he saw me. "Lucas, you shouldn't be here." "No, David. I need to know the truth. Are you involved with Mark?" He sighed deeply, his face a mask of conflict. "Lucas, I was trying to protect you. Mark has something against me, something he used to force me to cooperate. But why didn't you tell me sooner? We could have worked this out together," I said, feeling a mixture of anger and disappointment. I thought I could handle it on my own, but things got out of hand. "Sorry, Lucas. I really tried. Mark's henchman tried to intervene, but Sarah appeared at my side, looking determined. I think you'd better get out of here before things get ugly, she told the man, who, realizing he was at a disadvantage, left the bar in a hurry. David, we need your help to take down Mark. Can you tell us what you know? I asked, hoping he was willing to redeem himself. David nodded, his eyes reflecting a mix of relief and regret. Yes, I'll help. Mark is involved in something much bigger than we imagine. He has an international data trafficking and money laundering network. With this new information, I felt like we were one step closer to exposing all the corruption. I got back in the car with Sarah, feeling that despite the betrayals and dilemmas, there was still hope. Let's get justice, Sarah. No matter the cost, I said, determined to move forward no matter the obstacles. She smiled, placing her hand on my shoulder. We're in this together, Lucas. We're going to take down Mark and everyone involved. As we drove back to our hideout, the sense of betrayal still weighed heavily on my heart, but the determination to see justice done was stronger. I knew that with David and Sarah's help, we were closer to exposing the truth and cleaning up the mess that Mark Thompson and his accomplices had spread. From the moment the threats started arriving, I realized that the situation was becoming extremely dangerous. Sarah and I were constantly reminded that we were dealing with powerful and unscrupulous people. One afternoon, as we reviewed some of the evidence in a discreet cafe in town, Sarah looked up from her laptop and murmured, "Lucas, we're being followed." I looked around, trying not to be obvious. "He is sure?" She nodded. "The guy in the black coat, 2 seats behind you. He's been staring at us since we arrived." I swallowed hard. "We need to get out of here now. Get your things." We got up quickly, trying not to appear rushed. We walked out of the cafe and out of the corner of my eye I noticed the man in the black coat was following us. "Let's turn the next corner and go into the hotel," I whispered to Sarah. She agreed, and so we did. We entered the hotel and, without registering, left through the side exit. We continued walking until we were sure we had lost our pursuer. "This is getting out of hand," Sarah said, panting. "We need to reinforce our security." I ran my hand across my forehead, feeling the weight of the situation. "You're right. Let's go to my apartment. We need to go over our plan." In the apartment, we started taking stricter measures. We installed new security software and changed our daily routines. Sarah even got some anti-tracking devices. "This should help a little," she said, as she installed a signal tracker on my cell phone. "I hope so," I replied. "We can't afford to miss any races now." The following days were a constant game of cat and mouse. We changed locations frequently, always alert for any sign that we were being followed. Meanwhile, the anonymous threats continued to arrive. One night I received a text message that said, "Stop now or you will pay the price." I showed the message to Sarah. "They are getting desperate. We need to be more careful, Lucas." "We can't let them get to us," she replied, a tone of concern in her voice. However, the situation worsened when we discovered that our equipment had been hacked. Some of the evidence we had collected was compromised. "Damn it!" I exclaimed, frustrated. "How did this happen?" Sarah was furious. "They must have found a loophole in our system. We need to further strengthen our security and review everything we have." We spent the entire night going through our files and making sure the rest of the evidence was safe. The tiredness was evident on our faces, but the determination to move forward was greater. "We can't let them intimidate us," Sarah said firmly. "We are close to unmasking all this corruption." I agreed. "Yes, but we need to be even more cautious. Every move must be planned with precision." At this point, our lives had become one of constant surveillance. Every step on the street, every unknown person around us, everything seemed like a potential threat. The tension was palpable, but the conviction to expose Mark Thompson and his network of corruption kept us going. It was on one of those nights of paranoia and planning that Sarah looked at me and said, "Lucas, I just want you to know that I'm in this until the end." No matter what. Those words meant a lot. Thank you, Sarah. I don't know what I would do without you. She smiled slightly. Let's take this guy down together. The battle was just beginning, and we knew the path would be arduous and dangerous. But we were ready to face whatever came, determined to see justice prevail, whatever the cost. Confronting David was, without a doubt, one of the most harrowing moments of my career. I always considered him a mentor, someone I could trust blindly. In recent days, however, his evasiveness and suspicious behavior have begun to raise painful questions. I needed answers, and the only way to get them was to face him directly. That night, I waited until the newsroom was practically empty. David was still in his office, the soft light from his lamp illuminating the papers spread across his desk. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves, and knocked on the door. "David, can I talk to you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked up, evidently surprised by my visit at this hour. "Of course, Lucas. Come in. What's going on?" I closed the door behind me and sat in the chair in front of his desk. For a moment, I thought about how to approach the subject. I decided to be direct. "David, I know you're involved in some way with Mark Thompson. And I know it's not by choice. I need you to tell me the truth now." David's eyes widened, and he was silent for a few moments. Finally, he sighed, seeming to age years in a matter of seconds. "Lucas, I never wanted you to get involved in this. I tried to keep you out, but Mark is a dangerous man. He blackmailed me. He has something against me, something that could destroy my career and my personal life. But why didn't you ever tell me anything?" I asked, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "I could have helped." David shook his head. "I was trying to protect you. You have so much potential, and I didn't want you to get burned because of my failures." The revelation took me by surprise. I knew David was in a difficult situation, but I had no idea how trapped he was. However, at that moment, it became clear that we needed to work together if we were going to take Mark down. "David, we are so close to exposing everything. Sarah and I already have a lot of proof, but we need more information. We need something that will really take us to the top of the corruption network." David looked at me with a mix of hope and despair. "I have something that might help. Mark uses a secret server to store all of his most compromising transactions. I know where it is and how to access it, but it is extremely dangerous. We're willing to take the risk," I said. "We need this information." He nodded, resigned. "All right. Let's do this." That same night, David guided us to the secret server. With Sarah's help, we were able to access a huge amount of data that revealed an international network of data trafficking and money laundering. The evidence was irrefutable. However, we knew we were treading on dangerous ground. "Lucas, we need to be extremely careful about this," Sarah warned. "If Mark finds out we have this information, he will stop at nothing to silence us." "I know," I replied. "But now, with this evidence, we have a real chance of taking him down." David looked at us, his face more determined than ever. "You are our best hope. Don't let him escape." With the new information in hand, we knew the next step would be crucial. The threats we received could not stop us. We were closer than ever to exposing the whole truth, and I was determined to see justice served, no matter the price we had to pay. I was sitting in my little office, reviewing for the 1000th time the evidence that Sarah and I had collected. The threats were increasing and time seemed increasingly short. It was then that the door opened and Clara walked in, her face a mask of confusion and anger. "Lucas, what's going on?" she asked, her voice shaking with emotion. "I found these files on your computer. Are you investigating Mark Thompson? Why didn't you tell me anything?" My heart sank. I knew this moment would come, but I wasn't prepared to face it. "Clara, I didn't want to get you involved. It's too dangerous." "Too dangerous?" Clara repeated, in disbelief. "I'm your girlfriend, Lucas. If we can't trust each other, What are we doing together? I was trying to protect you, I said, feeling completely helpless. I knew that if I knew, I could become a target too. I'm already a target, she snapped. I'm a lawyer for one of the companies involved, remember? If Mark finds out you're investigating, he could very well come after me too. We should have been in this together from the beginning. We stared at each other in silence for a moment, the tension between us almost palpable. Finally, I sighed and gave in. You're right. I should have trusted you. But now that you know, we need your help. Clara mumbled something inaudible, but nodded. All right, Lucas. I'll help you. I'll use my legal knowledge to make sure the evidence you and Sarah collected is legally protected. If we're going to expose Mark, we need to make sure he doesn't get off on a technicality. Relief and gratitude flooded me. Thank you, Clara. It means a lot to me. Don't make it seem like everything is fine between us, she warned. I'm still really upset with you. With Clara's help, we began to legally shield the evidence. Sarah, who had heard our argument from the hallway, entered the office. So Clara is on board? She asked. Yes, Clara replied coldly. And you must tell me everything you know. We need to make sure every detail is documented and that there are no loopholes Mark can use. We spent hours reviewing every file, every email, every financial transaction we had uncovered. Clara was in her element, pointing out legal issues that Sarah and I would never have considered. His competence was undeniable, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. We need a plan to expose Mark, Clara said finally, looking between the two of us. Something big, something he can't suppress. A live report, Sarah suggested. If we can broadcast live, he won't be able to interrupt. We need a channel that is willing to take the risk. I know someone, I said, remembering an old colleague who now worked at an independent news channel. I can try to contact him. If he accepts, we'll have our chance. Clara nodded. Let's do this. But, Lucas, promise me you won't hide anything from me anymore. I looked directly into his eyes. I promise, Clara. We're in this together now. As we began to map out our plan, the tension between us began to ease. Clara was still hurt, but her determination to help us was a sign that maybe we could get through this together. We knew the road ahead would be dangerous, but we were ready to face anything to expose the truth and bring justice. I woke up to the dim sunlight coming through the hospital window, still dazed by the recent events. The pain was pulsing, but adrenaline was still coursing through my body, keeping me conscious and focused. My first thought was about Clara and Sarah. Were they safe? Were you able to continue with the investigation? As I tried to get up, the bedroom door slowly opened and Clara walked in, her face a mix of worry and determination. Lucas! He exclaimed, running to my side. Thank God, you're awake. Clara, I murmured, my voice hoarse and weak. What happened after? She sat next to me, holding my hand firmly. You were attacked, Lucas. It was horrible. But Sarah and I managed to escape, and we are more determined than ever to take Mark down. We won't let him get away with it. I looked into her eyes, feeling a wave of gratitude and relief. I knew I could count on you, Clara. But, what about the evidence? Are they safe? Clara nodded, squeezing my hand tighter. Yes, Sarah managed to encrypt and hide everything before they could be compromised. We're one step ahead, Lucas. And we won't stop until Mark pays for everything. The physical pain seemed to lessen under the force of her words. Clara had always been a rock, but now she was more determined than ever. She was willing to risk everything, just like me. This gave me a new dose of energy. We need to act quickly, Clara. Mark won't stop until he silences us once and for all. We have to expose the whole truth before he can get to us again. She nodded, her eyes shining with a fierce intensity. Sarah is working on a plan to broadcast the exams live. We need to make sure nothing goes wrong this time. Suddenly, the door opened again, and Sarah walked in, her posture confident and a laptop in hand. "Lucas, it's good to see you awake," she said, with a rare smile on her face. "We have work to do." "Sarah, I'm in. What we need to do?" She walked over, placing the laptop on the table next to my bed. "I've already plotted a safe route for transmission. Let's do this from a remote, untraceable location. We need your voice, Lucas. You are the face of this complaint." I looked at Clara, who nodded encouragingly, and then at Sarah. "Let's do this," I replied, feeling renewed determination. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparations. Clara used her legal contacts to ensure that all evidence was legally shielded. Sarah, with her exceptional skill, set up a fail-safe transmission system. And I, even weakened, prepared myself to be the voice that would denounce Mark Thompson and his corrupt scheme. Finally, the broadcast day arrived. We were in a safe place, ready to expose the truth. Nervousness was in the air, but determination was even stronger. "Everything's ready, Lucas," Sarah said, adjusting the camera. "The broadcast will begin in 3, 2, 1. I looked directly into the camera, feeling the weight of the moment. "Good night. My name is Lucas, and I am a journalist. Today, we're here to expose a network of corruption that encompasses political bribery, news manipulation and more, led by Mark Thompson, editor-in-chief of one of the country's largest newspapers." The broadcast was a success. The evidence was exposed, and the reaction was immediate. The police acted quickly, arresting Mark and several of his accomplices. Justice was finally being served. Still in the hospital, Clara and Sarah by my side, I felt a wave of relief and satisfaction. We had won, not without scars, but in one piece. Mark was arrested, and the truth had been revealed. Clara hugged me, whispering in my ear, "We did it, Lucas. We achieved." I smiled, feeling new hope for the future. The truth had prevailed, and I knew that together we could face anything. Recovered, I knew that the decisive moment was approaching. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as we gathered all the evidence we had collected over the last few months. Sarah, Clara, David and I were a team determined to take down Mark Thompson and expose his entire network of corruption. The tension was palpable, but the certainty that we were about to see justice gave us strength. "Lucas, we have everything ready for the live broadcast," said Sarah, with a determined expression on her face. "The servers are set up and there's no way Mark can interfere this time." I looked at Clara, who was organizing the legal documents that would shield our evidence. She gave me an encouraging smile. "We're ready, Lucas. Let's put an end to this once and for all," said Clara, with a firmness that comforted me. David was next to me, reviewing the last details of the report we were going to broadcast. He had been a mentor to me, and seeing him committed to exposing the truth was proof that even in the face of adversity, integrity still prevailed. "Remember, Lucas, once we start, there will be no going back. Make sure you are prepared for the consequences," warned David, with a serious look. I nodded, aware of the weight of that decision. I took a deep breath and turned on the transmission equipment. Sarah's image appeared on the screen, ready to start the live broadcast. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sarah Mendez, and this is a special live broadcast. Today, we will reveal a series of damning evidence that exposes a corruption scheme involving political bribery, news manipulation and an international money trafficking network, data and money laundering, led by editor Mark Thompson," Sarah began, her voice firm. As the broadcast continued, we presented documents, recordings and testimonies that incriminated Mark and his accomplices. Each revelation was a direct blow to Mark's reputation, and the public reaction was immediate. Social media exploded with comments, and the pressure on the authorities increased by the second. Suddenly, an unexpected surprise. Sarah looked directly into the camera, and her voice shook a little as she began to speak. "Before I continue, I would like to reveal something personal. My real name is Sarah Rodriguez, and I am the sister of one of Mark Thompson's victims. My involvement in this investigation has never been just professional, but also a search for personal justice. I thank everyone for helping me expose the truth. Sarah's revelation added an emotional layer to the investigation, and I felt a lump in my throat when I saw the tears in her eyes. She had carried this burden for so long, and now, finally, she was getting justice for her family. "Sarah, you were incredible," I whispered, moved. "Thank you, Lucas. I couldn't have done this without you," she replied, smiling through her tears. The broadcast continued for a few more minutes, detailing all the evidence and legal implications. When we finally finished, the company's security team sprung into action, and the police arrived to arrest Mark and his accomplices. Mark was led away in handcuffs, and for the first time, I saw the fear in his eyes. He knew his empire of corruption was crumbling, and there was no longer any way to escape. "You're not going to get away with this, Mark," I said, looking directly at him. "Justice will prevail." With Mark arrested and the evidence presented, the feeling of accomplishment was indescribable. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and repercussions. I received countless messages of support and recognition for my courage and determination in exposing the truth. Eventually, I was called by the company's editorial board. Sitting in the meeting room, my heart was beating fast. The chairman of the board looked at me with a satisfied smile. "Lucas, your courage and integrity have not gone unnoticed. We are happy to announce that you have been promoted to editor-in-chief," he declared, extending his hand to shake me. I thanked him, moved, and mentally promised to continue honoring truth and justice. The fight had been arduous, but ultimately, journalistic integrity prevailed. And as Mark faced a long prison sentence, I knew that true triumph lay in never giving up the search for the truth.